Mm. The time is now for Arizona football. No next year. The time is right now.
You are Locked On Wildcats, your daily podcast on the Arizona Wildcats. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks for keeping it locked on Wildcats. I'm your host, Mike Luke. This show is brought to you by FanDuel. Check it out, FanDuel.com. All kinds of really good stuff. You can bet on games, and football and basketball is here. You know your money's good. Check it out at FanDuel.com. All right, now, Arizona football. The time is now. Listen, we've talked about this on some shows, but I am very much of the opinion Arizona needs to go for broke this season. And we're going to explain why. But first, as many of you know, Arizona football has had some very good seasons. There's no doubt about it. But I think the main thing, though, is that Arizona's just never been able to string together good football seasons. And, you look at it like 93. You go into the year with so much hype in 94. And then essentially, you end up going 8-4 with a loss in the Liberty Bowl or whatever it was. And then obviously at 98, 12-1, then the next season, boom, Penn State happens. Arizona football doesn't recover for about 20 years. Okay, so this year's team is really, really good. And, we've talked about this a great deal, but, you look around and anybody that was at that Friday practice knows you look at this team and you know that there's a lot to like about this squad. And when I say there's a lot to like about this squad, we can just start at the quarterback position. Listen, in my lifetime, I've always felt the two best quarterbacks I've ever seen here were Nick Foles and Keith Smith. And obviously, Keith Smith was, U of A record holder with a passing efficiency and whatnot. Nick Foles, future Super Bowl MVP. So both those guys, obviously, very good. I expect Noah Fifita, when he is done here, will leave here as the best quarterback in school history. I think he'll also possibly be the most beloved player in U of A football history. He's got that type of vibes to it. He's got all of that to him. And watching him, the way that he can move around, the way that he has commanded this team, he's good, man. I mean, like I said, he's a sophomore, but something that you need to keep in mind as well is that, yes, while he is a sophomore, this is a guy that basically has fifth-year senior understanding and a maturity. He is he's a phenomenon. He is can make every throw, and like we've talked about, the arm strength is even better than I think that we even thought that it was. And not only is the arm strength better, he is adapted very well to what Dino Babers wanted. But that also doesn't surprise me because he's a real student of the game. He wants to be good, and Dino Babers has talked about how he is. Nothing the young man does surprises him. In short, Arizona's not going to have, and again, Arizona will have him for a couple more years, but Arizona's not going to have another quarterback like Noah Fifita with this kind of talent around him, most likely anyways. Noah Fifita, like I said, is the dude who is how do I put this? He is a guy who, he's ready for the moment, which leads me to my next point. The one thing you're definitely not going to have again is a Teteroa McMillan. Teteroa McMillan is the best wide receiver in school history, ex-5-star wide receiver, and not only is he dynamic, he's an awesome football player and a good dude as well. He's going to be in the NFL in a year. Barring something catastrophic, he is going to be in the NFL, and he's probably going to be a top 10 to 15 pick. Those kind of players don't come through Arizona. The last football player that kind of flirted with that top 10 status was Dennis Northcutt. That was 25 years ago. With T-Mac's just a different animal. T-Mac is, you watch him, and the beloved catch radius that everybody talks about, the way that he can high point the ball, and his acceleration got much, much better at last season. Now, he's obviously coming off a foot injury, so we'll see exactly where that's at. But T-Mac was an absolute stud. And Arizona doesn't get football players like him. Maybe you develop them, but this dude was ready to rock and roll right out the gate, an absolute monster. You're not going to get another dude like T-Mac most likely in the foreseeable future. You get to the offensive line, and you got some of that same thing going on as well. Big Jonah Savaiinaea, most likely going to be a first-round pick at this time next year. I mean, when Jonah Savaiinaea stepped foot on campus, everybody in the media room was like, whoa, this is a lot different. And I think with Big Jonah, you understand that he can play tackle, he can play guard, he can do a lot of different things. He's going to be a first-round pick. Now, you could say, well, Jordan Morgan was a first-round pick last year. Correct. Maybe Arizona gets 2 offensive linemen in back-to-back years that are first-round picks. But Big Jonah, again, another guy, you don't get players like him that come through here a lot. He's somebody you got to capitalize on because I think he's going to go. Now, some of these other players on the line, Wendell Moy, I believe Wendell's going to play in the NFL as well. And I think with Wendell Moy, and I think with some of the other players at hand, this can be a strong offensive line. Now, again, the depth isn't necessarily there, but I think that we're kind of at the point now where, you got 5 or 6 good players, and you just got to basically cross your fingers and hope that nobody gets hurt. If nobody gets hurt, then I think Arizona is in really, really good shape. But just looking along the offensive side of the football with Noah, with T-Mac, with Jonah, some of the dudes on the line, heck, you should have a really dynamic running game. I think between Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, Quali Conley, Pham, you're going to have a really, really nice running game. The pieces are all there. You can't, because next year you could easily be without T-Mac, you could easily be without Jonah, and so on and so forth. So that offense, this is the year. And we're going to talk about the schedule coming up here in a second. But I think with the schedule, a big part of it is you got to be able to put string wins together. And I think that this team is going to be equipped to do that. And you could say, well, you got Noah for 2 more years. That's true, but it's one of those things. Tomorrow's really promised to nobody. And when it comes to U of A football, Arizona fans know that better than anybody, that tomorrow is promised to absolutely nobody. So you're Arizona. This is the year. This is the time. You got to be able to strike. And I think that Arizona is going to. I think Arizona is going to be able to do it. I think that Brent Brennan knows that he is in really, really good shape. And I think that Brent Brennan knows that this team is ready to go. But the fact that Noah has been able to adapt so quickly to what Dino Babers wants, I think is really, really impressive. And the coaching staff, too, to their credit, has done a really, really good job with all these young men, letting them know what their expectations are and putting in an offense that tailors around them. I think it was an interesting point when Dino Babers and, Brent Brennan said, listen, we're going to do a different offense, but we want your input. What are things that you liked last year? What are things that you want to continue to be able to do? And, and they put it together. So again, I think you got to give this staff, this offense, a lot of credit. Like I said, though, the one thing that you got to keep in mind, though, is that you're probably not going to have an offense this talented in quite a while. And that's just a statement of fact here at the U of A. Now, you could have teams that are going to be really, really good, but I just don't know that you're going to have the top end type talent. And I think there's going to be some of that take on the defense as well. But we're going to talk about that. But first, FanDuel.com. Check it out. All kinds of really good stuff at FanDuel. Listen, football is here, basketball right around the corner, and the very fun thing about FanDuel is that your money is good. So whether you're betting on football, whether you're betting on basketball, whatever the case may be, it's already fun. But really getting in the action then with some FanDuel, another one of these ones where you will thank me later. This is true for this because, again, FanDuel is where it's at. And again, there's nothing more enjoyable than betting on sports, especially sports you like you got a little bit of money and that money is good. So again, check it out. FanDuel.com, another one of these ones where you will thank me later. All right, come back with us, and we are going to talk a little bit about the defense. Thanks for keeping it locked on Wildcats and making this your first listen of the day. I am your host, Mike Luke. Okay, now let's talk about the defense because there are some other guys, too, that you're probably not going to necessarily have in a year. Takario Davis, most likely going to go pro. Well, listen, when you're a DB and you're 20 years old and you start showing up on first round draft boards, you are there's a very good likelihood that you are going to end up in the NFL draft, which is obviously, that is what it is. Now, listen, I think some of the players on defense maybe aren't as irreplaceable as, some of the guys on offense, but either way, it is it's something that you got to keep in mind. Probably not going to have a Tacario Davis next year. It's probably going to be in the NFL. Then you look at some of the attrition factors. Obviously, Traden Stukes has gone after this year. Dwayne Aquina, huge fan of Traden Stukes, and he obviously should be because he's a player that is at a he's just a really, really good football player all the way around, and somebody that is easy to watch and say, all right, you can see why this coaching staff likes him so much. Stukes, a monster, as we've talked about. So you got Tacario Davis, Traden Stukes. Then you likely have a Gunnar Maldonado as well. Who's going to be a senior, who's probably going to be moving on. So you got those three just in that defensive backfield, and that's where and that's obviously a really, really good unit. Who knows what happens? A Dalton Johnson, Genesis Smith, guys like that, they can all come back, but you never know. Jacob Manu, I would imagine that he's going to be back. But listen, Jacob Manu is going to be an All-American this year, barring injury. So he's going to have some options. Again, I don't think he's going to be a first or a second or a third round pick, but he's going to have some options thrown his way. That's going to be an interesting one to watch. And then on the defensive line, you're going to be losing Chuba. Obviously, we haven't even seen Chuba play here yet, but, you're losing a Dart and stuff like that. The point is, on defense, though, I think some of these places it's more replaceable than the offense. But the point is the same. The time is now. The time is ready. This isn't something where you can basically say, all right, well, let's just get the sea legs going for everybody, and next year will be that year. No, the year's now. The year is right now. And again, if you get 9 or 10 wins this year, all of a sudden you put together two really, really good back-to-back football seasons, and it becomes a lot easier to be able to recruit football players, in my opinion, if you've got those back-to-back seasons already banked in the book, because then at that point, then you're dealing with adolescent kids who are used to Arizona, or at least the thought of Arizona football being good, and there being hype around Arizona football. That's where you need to capitalize on, because again, Arizona football is never going to have the biggest NIL in the world. They're never going, it's not going to be this place but if you start putting dudes in the NFL, which we're going to talk about here in a second, and winning games, then it becomes a lot more enjoyable. The NFL part is the next part that I think we need to talk about, in that, listen, for the longest time, Arizona had like nobody in the NFL. You had Rob Gronkowski, who in my opinion is probably the best tight end in NFL history, but then you had basically nothing. You had the Rich Rod years where no Rich Rod recruited players, to my knowledge, became real difference makers in the NFL. Maybe I'm missing a player or two. I apologize if I am. But, that's something the kids look at. Who's in the NFL? Who can get me to the NFL? And Arizona has not had that. Now, Jordan Morgan, Kevin Sumlin recruit. If you get him to the you get him, he's in the NFL now. He was a first-round pick. Then after that, Jacob Cowing was a fourth-round pick. Tanner McLaughlin was picked as well. So this past year, you had a first-rounder, and then you had a couple other ones, and I expect all those players, Cowing and McLaughlin, I expect them to stick. I think they're going to be players that are going to be in the NFL for a long time. That's the kind of stuff the kids like seeing. So now, can you string that together then? Can a T-Mac be a top 10 to 15 pick where another player can grow up saying, I want to be like T-Mac? Can that be the case for Arizona? Then can Jonas Savaiinaea get in the first round as well? And what about Tacario Davis? Think about it this way. If you have 3 first-round picks from the University of Arizona, that makes Brent Brennan's job a lot easier at that point, because you can say, listen, man, we put 4, and no matter who the case may be, we put 4 first-rounders in the NFL in the past 2 years. That is, there's not going to be a lot of schools in the country that can say that. And even if you can't, the point is still made. You're going to have between those 3 players, and then you're obviously on the other guys that could be in the mix as well to get into the NFL. You got maybe a Gunnar Maldonado in some way, shape, or form is able to make the NFL. Traden Stukes, I believe, will be in the NFL in some capacity. So again, you could have a litany of NFL players coming from the University of Arizona this year. And then, like I said, maybe he starts becoming a school that's looked at as having some really, really good NFL players. We'll see how that plays out. But so from a individual perspective of players being good, needing to get them on the field, that obviously has been very, very good for the U of A. But also, there's another aspect in play here too, and that's just winning games. And that's where it kind of comes into the character of this team, in my opinion. I think that they know, I think with so many of them came back, I think they know that this is the year for them, that this is the year that everything is kind of lined up for them to make that move. And I think they know that. Listen, these are a lot of smart kids that we're dealing with here. And I think they know that all of their futures are probably going to be a little bit different at this time next year. I don't think there's anybody in T-Mac's camp or Noah's camp that doesn't expect T-Mac to be in the NFL in a year. I don't think that, and I think that's the same way with Jonas Sabanea. I think that's the same way with Tacario Davis as well. These dudes are going to be in the NFL, but all of them came back, I think, to have a really special season. I think that they have a great camaraderie with each other. And I just look at Tacario Davis. Tacario Davis entered the transfer portal, but Tacario Davis also took the time to give this new coaching staff a shot. And what this new coaching staff has been able to do has been absolutely remarkable. I mean, they've kept all these guys. They've kept, and granted, a lot of that is because of the character that some of these players possess. But I think everybody knows that this is the year. This is the year for that special season. And I don't see why there isn't. We talked about it yesterday. There's not a lot of glaring holes on this football team. As a matter of fact, I don't know that there's one position where you're like, all right, there's no talent there. Now, there's some that are obviously not as deep as others. Totally get that. But there's not one where you're like, oh, we're in a lot of trouble right here. There's none of that. So that's where I think it's exciting if you're an Arizona football fan, because we've gone into a lot of seasons knowing, okay, well, we got to mask this part. We got to mask this part. There is really none of that in play. And on top of that, you know that everybody is going to be on the same page because of the character of this football team, the character of these players and everything that is involved. So I think that's going to be something that's very, very interesting to see how this all plays, out. I think with now, when it comes to the coaching staff here, I think this is, listen, with the way that Jed Fish left things, I think there was a lot of people that were kind of like, all right, well, this isn't ideal. But Brent Brennan, to me, is the right man at the right time, even if it was kind of looked at as a bland hire. We're going to talk about that in a second. But first, eBay Motors. Check it out. Here's the deal with eBay Motors. Now, everybody, if you're like me and you know nothing about cars, you're probably tired of getting fleeced. You're probably tired of going to a car dealership and knowing you're probably getting screwed over. Nobody likes that. So eBay Motors says, let us help you. Millions of parts for your MVP. Win every time with parts that fit your ride. The great thing about eBay Motors, though, is that you can get it, and then you can take it to somebody you trust. And I think that is just a big part of it. The reliability factor that eBay Motors has in play, I think, is something that is very, very important. And again, they're not forcing you to buy anything. You look at it and you choose if you want to buy, or whatever the case may be. eBay Motors says, help us help you. So again, millions of parts for your MVP. Win every time with parts that fit your ride. This is another one of these ones where you will thank me later. But good stuff all the way around. eBay Motors, check it out, because cut out the middleman. Again, win every time with parts that fit your ride. Millions of parts for your MVP. Thanks for keeping it locked on Wildcats and making this your first listen of the day. I am your host, Mike Luke. Okay, now let's talk about the coaches. Coaches know this. That's the other part about this. I'm happy, and this is a good Dave Hickey hire. I'm happy they made I'm higher that Brent Brennan was that hire. The guy who you put in there, and He's been a coach for quite a while. There's a maturity level in play for him that I don't know that a lot of coaches that you might have hired would have had, really, honestly. I think if you had hired somebody else, there might be times where you're like, all right, well, what's really the deal with what's really the deal here with all of that? With Brent Brennan, you know that it's good. He's good to go. And you know that this is a team that with a coaching staff with plenty of experience. These aren't, all first-time coordinators or guys looking to get to know each other. Dino Babers and Brent Brennan have a very, very good rapport with each other, obviously. And not only do they have a very good rapport with each other, they've known each other. They know they stay with each other. They know exactly what they have on their hands. And I think everybody's kind of working on that on that page. Then you've also got Dwayne Aquina. Dwayne Aquina, who, again, the greatest defensive backs coach of all time, they all have a good synergy with each other. You could tell by watching them that it is something that they, like I said, you look at them, they just have a really good understanding of where they are at. And I think they all know they need to win. And I think they all know that they have talent. This isn't something where I got no talent here and I got to try to scheme my way through stuff. No. There is none of that. And all these guys have lived Arizona football. They know the precarious nature of which it is and where you got to strike now. And that's only going to help in recruiting. And I also think, too, if Arizona wins big, you're going to have to give Brent Brennan a lot of credit, again, for plugging a lot of those holes. You lost basically your entire running back room outside of Speedy, and Jed didn't play Speedy. So between Speedy, Quali Conley, Ja'Cory Krosky, Merritt, those three dudes, you got three guys that can all play, and two of those guys obviously were brought in by Brennan. The wide receiver unit, you lost some players, but I think with Jeremiah Patterson, you got to feel pretty good that they did that. And then obviously at the tight end position, I think you're going to see players like we talked about, Kean Burnett, continue to emerge. This is should just be a really good team. And I think Brent Brennan was able to take inventory really quickly of what he needed, what he was able to do as far as from a roster filling perspective. And he was able to do just that. So again, we'll find out how exactly that all plays out. But again, 9 wins, bare minimum. That's the bare minimum. You got Kansas State and you got Utah. I think Arizona's going to beat Kansas State. I think they'll probably end up losing to Utah. But I look at this team and I'm like, man, they can beat anybody on this roster at any given time. So we are going to we'll see how this plays out. But the roster, like I said, the schedule is all set up. Schedule. And like I said, there's nobody on this schedule that Arizona can't beat. So there's that. Now, tomorrow, we're going to talk all Arizona basketball recruiting. All of it. I know I've been teasing this for a while, but we're going to talk all Arizona basketball recruiting. We are going to talk about, let's see here, Koa Pete, Braden Burries, Mikkel Brown, a bunch of other dudes that are kind of in the mix, kind of where things are at with Cam Holmes. Again, with Koa Pete, this is obviously the priority for Arizona. I would expect Arizona to be in very good shape for him. But as we know, none of this stuff is over until a player is committed and then signed. But Arizona's done, I think, a very, very good job with Koa Pete. And there's a litany of other guys that we're going to talk about as well. But and then we'll obviously get back into football after that. But got to give basketball a little bit of due as well. Obviously, Tommy Lloyd's got a really good team on his hands right around the corner. But on that note, as always, very, very much appreciate you all making Locked On Wildcats your first listen of the day. I'm your host, Mike Luke. We'll be back with you tomorrow. Bear down, back the A, and thanks for making Locked On Wildcats your first listen of the day.